Hey everyone, thanks so much for being here. Last week we had over 50 people join the webinar, and so this week I wanted to keep it a little more focused and intimate. So if your student is taking the SAT this summer or fall, and you've been wondering whether the prep you're doing is actually the right prep, then this is going to be for you. Now today, I want to make sure that this is simple, practical, and actually useful for you guys, because most families aren't struggling because there's no SAT advice online. They're actually struggling because there's too much of it, and most of it never turns into a real plan. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is show you what strong SAT prep should actually look like week to week. So this isn't going to be a giant 40-page study plan. I'm going to show you what a real family can actually use. And by the end, you should be able to answer 3 questions. What should my student be doing each week? How do I know if it's working? And when is self-study enough versus when does more structure actually help? So here's a simple roadmap. First, I'll show you why SAT prep usually stalls. And then I'll show you the 3 things that should happen every week. And then I'll show you what a realistic week actually looks like. And finally, I'll show you how to tell whether the plan is actually working and when more structured support starts to make sense. So if you've ever felt like your student is studying, but you still can't tell whether there's a real system underneath it, you're not imagining it. And that's exactly the gap that we're going to fix here. So here's the big problem. Most SAT prep stalls because students are doing a lot of work, but not the right kind of work. And that creates a really dangerous illusion. They feel busy, but the score doesn't move much. And this is what that often looks like in real life. They do random practice questions, they take a test, look at the score, and then move on. They study hard for 1 week and then lose momentum. Or they keep reviewing things that they already know instead of fixing the patterns that are actually costing points. And this is the part that most families actually miss. The issue usually isn't effort, the issue is structure. Students usually do not need more random practice. They need better practice. They need a clear weekly plan, a real system for reviewing mistakes, and enough structure to stay consistent. So that's the difference between we're doing SAT prep versus we actually have a plan. So you might be wondering, what should a good prep week actually include? It's going to include 3 things, and the order matters. So first is going to be targeted practice. That means practice tied to actual week areas, not just whatever feels productive that day. Second is going to be mistake review. And this is the part that most students skip. They see what they got wrong, glance at the answer, and then move on. And this is not review. Real review sounds more like this. Was this a concept problem, a timing problem, a careless error, a strategy issue? Did I misread the question? Did I rush it? And third is timed work. So at some point each week, students need to practice under real pressure because knowing the material and executing under the clock are not the same thing. So if a student is missing any one of these, progress is going to slow down. And that's why I like to think of strong prep as a loop. You target the problem, review the mistake, and then test execution under real pressure. Now let's make this practical. What does a realistic week actually look like? It might look something like this. So 1 day is for reviewing mistakes, 1 day is for targeted reading and writing practice, 1 day is for targeted math practice, and later in the week, the student does timed work. Then finally, they correct what happened and set the next target. So the exact days can change and the exact pacing can change. But what's important is that the structure should stay roughly the same. And here's the key idea that I really want to emphasize. The goal isn't to cram everything. The goal is to create a workable rhythm. So focused practice, honest review, timed execution, and then you just repeat all that. So from over 8 years of tutoring, I would much rather see a student follow a realistic plan for 6 to 8 weeks rather than just study a lot in a messy way for 3 months. And that's because consistency beats random intensity almost every time. And parents should also be able to see the plan instead of guessing what their students are doing. So this is one of the most important parts. How do you know whether the plan is actually working before the official score report shows up? You shouldn't be waiting for one final number to tell you everything. So instead, look for weekly signals. Are mistakes getting less repetitive? Is pacing improving? Is the student finishing more of the section on time? Are they reviewing wrong answers seriously or just moving on? Do they know what to focus on next? So those are going to be the leading indicators. And those are also the signals that'll tell you whether the system is tightening up. And this matters because strong prep should create visibility, not just for the student, but for the parent as well. You should be able to say, here's what's improving, and here's what still needs work, and here's what we're focusing on next. So that's a very different feeling from just hoping the score eventually goes up. Now let's talk about self-study, because self-study can definitely work, but for the right student. If they're consistent, honest about mistakes, and also able to manage their own schedule, self-study tools can absolutely be enough. But most students who struggle are not incapable. What they're missing is just structure and follow-through. Usually, support helps when the student starts strong and fades, does practice without reviewing it well, avoids the weakest areas, or keeps saying that they're studying without having a clear system. And that's the biggest distinction that I want parents to hear very clearly. Needing structure does not mean your student is lazy. It does not mean that they're behind. It usually means that they do better when someone helps them set targets, review mistakes, and stay accountable. And that's a very normal problem because it needs a real system instead of just more guessing. So, once you take all those problems seriously, the natural question becomes, what should the system actually include? And that's what LearnHaus is built around. It's not just more tutoring hours, it's actually a managed version of the plan that we just walked through. So that includes weekly targets, mistake tracking, accountability, and parent visibility. In other words, tutoring that fits into a real system instead of floating by itself. So if a family wants a totally self-serve route, there are cheaper options online. But if a family wants more structure, more visibility, and more follow-through, that's where this kind of model helps. And that's also why the current SAT offer is built around a clear weekly plan, session summaries, and a clear next step instead of just saying, here are some tutoring hours, good luck on your test. So plans start at $3.99 per month, and the fit call is going to be free. So if this was helpful, here's the simplest next step. There's going to be 3 options in order of effort. So let's start with the first one. So first, you can download the free SAT weekly plan. That's going to give you a simple structure that you can use right away. So you guys can find that by just following the link on the slide, or if you Google LearnHaus free plan, it should pop up as well. And that's going to give you a simple structure that you can use right away. And second, reply with your student's grade and target test date. And I'll tell you what I'd focus on first for your specific timeline. So you can either do that by messaging me on Messenger through however you signed up for this webinar, or you can just email me at paulkim@learnhaus.net. And third, if it looks like your student needs more structure and follow through, then you can book a free fit call. So you can scan the QR code on the slide, and that's the point where we can talk about whether LearnHaus is actually the right fit and build the plan on call. So again, the order matters. Free plan first, the recommendation second, and third, the fit call. So it's very simple and it's just very clear next steps. Okay, so I'll leave you with this. Most SAT prep problems are not caused by lack of effort. They're caused by lack of structure. So if your student has a clear weekly plan, a real mistake review process, and enough consistency to follow through, then prep is going to get much easier to manage. And if you want help figuring out what to focus on first, just reply with your student's grade and test date, and I'll tell you exactly where I'd start. Thank you guys again for being here, and I'll see you next time.